The sound of hammering echoed through the dry morning air as Beatrice Vaughn stood on the porch of what used to be her home, watching strangers nail a foreclosure notice to the wooden post she had painted just 3 summers ago with her late husband. She clutched the worn shawl around her shoulders despite the South Dakota heat beating down on Lead in late August of 1873. Her hands trembled as she read the words she already knew by heart, having received the letter from First National Bank 2 weeks prior. The farm, all 200 acres of it, would be auctioned off in 7 days to settle the debt her husband Thomas had accumulated before the fever took him last winter. "Madam, we are truly sorry," the younger of the 2 men said, removing his hat briefly before replacing it. "Bank's orders." Beatrice said nothing. What was there to say? The drought had destroyed most of the crops for 2 years running. The cattle had died from disease, and Thomas, sweet Thomas, had borrowed against the land to keep them afloat, certain that next season would be better. But there had been no next season for Thomas. The influenza that swept through Lade had taken him along with 32 others, leaving Beatrice alone at 24 years old with a mountain of debt and dirt that refused to yield anything but heartache. She watched the men ride away in their buggy, dust trailing behind them like the remnants of her dreams. The house stood silent behind her, too quiet without Thomas whistling while he worked, without his heavy boots on the wooden floors, without his laughter when she burned the biscuits. "Mama." Beatrice turned to see her daughter Emma peering through the doorway, her small face pinched with worry. At 6 years old, the girl understood more than Beatrice wished she did. "It is all right, sweetheart," Beatrice lied, forcing a smile. "Go finish your breakfast." Emma disappeared inside, and Beatrice sank onto the porch steps, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of it all. 7 days. In 7 days she would lose everything Thomas had built, everything they had dreamed of together. The home where Emma had been born. The fields where they had planned to expand. The barn Thomas had constructed with his own hands, board by board. She had tried everything. She had worked herself to exhaustion, planting what she could, taking in mending and laundry from the townspeople, even selling her mother's jewelry. But it was not enough. It would never be enough. The bank wanted $3,000, and she had managed to scrape together only $417. The sun climbed higher as Beatrice sat there, trying to formulate some kind of plan. She could find work in town, perhaps at the boarding house or the general store. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned needing help. It would not pay much, but it would keep her and Emma fed. They could find a small room somewhere, start over with nothing, just as so many others had done. But the thought of leaving this place, of watching someone else live in the home she had made with Thomas, of seeing another family walk these fields, made her chest constrict with such pain that she could barely breathe. "Mrs. Vaughn." The voice startled her from her thoughts. She looked up to find a tall man standing at the edge of her property, his horse grazing nearby. She had not heard him approach, lost as she was in her misery. He was probably in his late 20s, broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His clothes were dusty from travel, but his horse was well kept, and there was something in the way he carried himself that suggested capability and quiet strength. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, the color of storm clouds, and they regarded her with what appeared to be genuine concern. "I am sorry to disturb you," he said, taking a few steps closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "I am looking for the Vaughn farm. I believe this is it." Beatrice stood, smoothing her worn dress self-consciously. "It is, or it was. I am Beatrice Vaughn." "Jackson Ashford, madam." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "I heard in town that this property might be available soon." "Of course." He was here for the auction, come early to survey what he intended to buy. Beatrice felt her spine stiffen, her grief hardening into something sharper. "The auction is not for 7 days, Mr. Ashford. You are early." If he noticed the ice in her voice, he did not show it. "I am not here for the auction, Mrs. Vaughn. I am here to speak with you directly if you will give me a few minutes of your time." Beatrice crossed her arms. "If you are here to offer me some pittance for the land before the auction, you can save your breath and ride back to wherever you came from." Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. "That is not my intention. May I explain?" She should send him away. She should go inside and lock the door and ignore whatever scheme this stranger had concocted. But something in his voice, a sincerity she had not heard from anyone in weeks, made her pause. "Very well," she said finally. "Speak your piece." Jackson glanced toward the house. "Perhaps we could sit in the shade. It is a bit of a story." Against her better judgment, Beatrice gestured to the porch. She settled back onto the steps, and after a moment's hesitation, Jackson sat on the edge of the porch, keeping a proper distance between them. He turned his hat in his hands, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I knew your husband," he said finally. "Not well, but we crossed paths a few times. He helped me once, about 4 years back." Beatrice frowned. "Thomas never mentioned anyone named Ashford. He would not have. We met on a cattle drive up from Texas. I was 19, green as grass, and I made a stupid mistake that cost the outfit 50 head of cattle. Your husband was working as a drover on the same drive. When the trail boss wanted to leave me behind without pay, your husband spoke up for me. Said everyone deserves a chance to make things right. He convinced the boss to let me work off what I owed." A memory surfaced, unbidden. Thomas returning from that drive, telling her about a young man he had helped, how he had reminded him of himself at that age. She had teased him about his soft heart. "I do not understand," Beatrice said quietly. "What does this have to do with my farm?" Jackson met her eyes directly. "Your husband gave me a second chance when no one else would. I have done well for myself these past years. I own a ranch about 50 miles south of here near Custer. I have good land, good cattle, and more money than I need. When I heard in town that Thomas Vaughn's widow was losing her farm, I felt I owed it to his memory to help." Beatrice felt her heart begin to pound. "Help how?" "I want to buy the farm from the bank and give you the deed." The words hung in the air between them, so absurd that Beatrice was certain she had misheard. "You want to what?" "Give you the farm. Free and clear. It is what your husband would have done for me if our situations were reversed." Beatrice stood abruptly, anger flaring hot in her chest. "I do not need charity, Mr. Ashford. I may be broke and desperate, but I am not a beggar." Jackson stood as well, his voice remaining calm. "It is not charity, Mrs. Vaughn. It is a debt repaid. Your husband changed my life. Without him, I would have had nothing. I would have drifted from town to town, probably gotten myself killed doing something stupid. Instead, I built something real. I owe that to Thomas Vaughn, and I cannot repay him, but I can help his family." "No," Beatrice said flatly. "Absolutely not. I will not accept such a thing." "Why not?" "Because it is too much. Because I do not know you. Because accepting $3,000 from a stranger is insane." "Then think of it as accepting from your husband's friend. You said yourself you barely knew him." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I knew him well enough to know he was a good man. I knew him well enough to know he would do the same for me. And I know that he would want his wife and daughter to keep their home." The mention of Emma made Beatrice falter. She thought of her daughter, who had already lost so much. Who loved this farm, these fields, the rope swing Thomas had hung from the old oak tree. Who should not have to grow up in a cramped boarding house room without space to run and play? "I cannot repay you," Beatrice said, her voice cracking despite her efforts to keep it steady. I am not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Jackson was quiet for a long moment. Nothing. I am asking nothing. I will buy the farm, sign the deed over to you, and ride back to my ranch. You will never have to see me again if you do not wish to. It was too good to be true. It had to be. Men did not simply give away fortunes to strangers, debt or no debt. There had to be some catch, some hidden price she would be expected to pay. I do not trust this, Beatrice said. I do not trust you. That is fair, Jackson acknowledged. You do not know me, but Mrs. Vaughn, what choice do you have? In 7 days, this farm will be auctioned off. You will lose it regardless. At least this way you keep your home. Beatrice wanted to argue, but the truth of his words cut through her resistance. He was right. She had no choice. Pride was a luxury she could not afford, not when Emma's future hung in the balance. If I agree to this, she said slowly, I want it done properly. Legal. I want papers drawn up, everything official, of course. And I want to understand why you are really doing this. The whole truth. Jackson looked out across the fields, his expression distant. The truth is that your husband saved me when he had no reason to. The truth is that I have more money than I know what to do with and no family to spend it on. The truth is that doing this feels right in a way nothing else has in a long time. He turned back to her. And the truth is that I cannot stand by and watch a good woman and her child lose everything when I have the power to stop it. There was something in his voice, a loneliness that Beatrice recognized because she felt it herself. This was not just about repaying a debt. This was about something deeper, something neither of them had words for yet. I need time to think, she said. Jackson nodded. The auction is in 7 days. I will return in 3 days for your answer. That gives you time to consider and time for me to arrange the money. He settled his hat back on his head. Whatever you decide, I will respect it. He walked to his horse and mounted in one smooth motion. For a moment, he looked down at her, and Beatrice had the strangest feeling that he wanted to say something more. But instead, he simply tipped his hat and rode away, leaving her alone with an impossible choice. Beatrice stood on the porch long after he disappeared from sight, her mind reeling. Inside the house, she could hear Emma singing to herself, a little song Thomas used to hum while working. The sound nearly broke her. Could she really trust this stranger? Could she accept such an enormous gift? What would people in town say? What would Thomas have wanted her to do? She already knew the answer to that last question. Thomas would have told her to swallow her pride and think of Emma. He would have said that accepting help was not weakness, it was wisdom. He had never been too proud to take assistance when it was offered honestly. But Thomas had also been a poor judge of character sometimes, trusting too easily, believing the best in people even when they did not deserve it. That was part of how they had ended up in debt in the first place. He had loaned money to neighbors who never repaid it, helped men who took advantage of his generosity. Beatrice went inside and found Emma playing with her wooden doll, the one Thomas had carved for her 3rd birthday. The girl looked up with a smile. Who was that man, Mama? Just someone who knew your father, Beatrice said, smoothing Emma's hair back from her face. How would you feel about staying here, sweetheart? In our home? Emma's eyes widened. We do not have to leave, maybe not. I am not certain yet, but maybe. The hope that bloomed on her daughter's face made Beatrice's decision for her. Whatever the risks, whatever the cost to her pride, she could not take that hope away. Not when it was the first real hope either of them had felt in months. 3 days later, Jackson Ashford returned, arriving in mid-morning with a lawyer from Deadwood. Beatrice had spent the intervening time cleaning the house obsessively, as if preparing for judgment. She had also asked around town about Jackson Ashford and learned that he was, by all accounts, exactly what he claimed to be. A successful rancher, honest in his dealings, known for his fair treatment of his ranch hands and his skill with horses. The lawyer, a bespectacled man named Mr. Collins, laid out papers on Beatrice's kitchen table while Jackson stood by the window, giving them space to talk. Mr. Collins explained everything in meticulous detail. Jackson would purchase the property from the bank for the full amount owed plus fees. The deed would then be transferred to Beatrice Vaughn with no liens, no debts, no conditions. "This is highly irregular," Mr. Collins said, peering at Beatrice over his glasses, "but it is entirely legal. If you sign here, Mrs. Vaughn, this property will be yours free and clear." Beatrice's hand shook as she took the pen. She looked up at Jackson, who was studiously examining the view outside her window. "Why?" she asked one more time. Jackson turned to face her. "Because your husband believed in second chances. Because you deserve to keep what is yours. Because I can help, and that should be reason enough." Beatrice signed her name, the scratch of the pen impossibly loud in the quiet kitchen. Mr. Collins witnessed it, added his own signature, and just like that it was done. The farm was hers. "The bank has been paid," Mr. Collins said, gathering the papers. "I will file these documents today. Congratulations, Mrs. Vaughn. Your troubles are over." After the lawyer left, Beatrice and Jackson stood in awkward silence. She did not know what to say, how to express gratitude for something so enormous it defied comprehension. "Thank you," she finally managed. "I know those words are not enough, but thank you." "They are enough," Jackson assured her. "I should head back to my ranch. I have left my foreman in charge for too long already." "Wait," Beatrice said impulsively. "At least let me feed you before you go. You have ridden all this way twice now. The least I can do is offer you a meal." Jackson hesitated, and Beatrice could see him weighing whether to accept. "I do not want to impose." "Mr. Ashford, you have just given me my home. A meal is not an imposition. It is woefully inadequate repayment." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less careworn. "In that case, Mrs. Vaughn, I would be honored to stay for a meal." Beatrice set about preparing food, grateful for something to do with her hands. She put together a simple meal of fried chicken, potatoes, and the last of her preserved green beans. Emma, who had been shy around Jackson at first, gradually warmed to him when he asked about her doll and listened with genuine interest to her rambling story about the adventures it had. As they ate, Jackson told them about his ranch, about the horses he raised, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. Beatrice found herself relaxing, laughing at his story about a particularly stubborn mare who had decided she would rather live with the wild mustangs than in his corral. "She came back after 3 weeks, Jackson said, shaking his head. "Walked right back into her stall like she had never left. I think she decided ranch life was easier than fending for herself." "Smart horse," Beatrice said, then caught herself. Was that too forward? But Jackson just smiled again. "The smartest I have ever owned. She is the mother of my best breeding line now." After the meal, Emma asked if Jackson wanted to see the rope swing, and before Beatrice could tell her not to bother their guest, Jackson had agreed. She watched from the porch as he pushed Emma on the swing, her delighted laughter ringing out across the yard. Thomas used to push her just like that, making her squeal with joy, but watching Jackson with Emma did not hurt the way Beatrice expected it to. Instead, it felt right somehow, like a piece of the world clicking into place. When the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Jackson finally prepared to leave. He saddled his horse while Beatrice wrapped up some leftover chicken for him to take. "You did not have to do that," he said as she handed him the package. "Yes, I did," Beatrice replied. "Thank you again, Mr. Ashford, For everything. Jackson swung into the saddle, then paused, looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Mrs. Vaughn, I hope you will not think me too forward, but I was wondering if I might visit again sometime. Just to see how you are settling in, make sure everything is working out with the farm." Beatrice's heart did an unexpected flutter. "I think that would be nice. Maybe in a few weeks, if that suits you." "Yes, that would be fine." He smiled, tipped his hat, and rode away. Beatrice watched until he disappeared, then went inside to find Emma already asking when Mr. Ashford would come back. "I do not know, sweetheart," Beatrice said, but she found herself hoping it would be soon. Jackson returned 3 weeks later, arriving on a Saturday afternoon with a wagon full of supplies. Beatrice, who had been weeding the vegetable garden, stood in surprise as he pulled up to the house. "I hope you do not mind," he said, climbing down from the wagon seat. "I had some extra seed that I thought you might be able to use, and some tools that were just taking up space in my barn." The wagon was loaded with far more than extra seed and tools. There were sacks of grain, new rope, fresh lumber, a plow blade that looked barely used, and a collection of other items that no working ranch would consider surplus. "Mr. Ashford, this is too much," Beatrice protested, even as her heart warmed at his thoughtfulness. "I told you I have more than I need, and please call me Jackson. Mr. Ashford makes me feel like I am being scolded." "Only if you call me Beatrice." "Beatrice," he said, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. He stayed for supper again, and this time the conversation flowed even easier. Jackson told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his own parents to cholera when he was 16, about the hard years of working odd jobs before finding his place with cattle and horses. Beatrice shared memories of Thomas, finding that it hurt less to speak of him than it had before, the pain dulled to a manageable ache. "He sounds like he was a good man," Jackson said. "He was," Beatrice agreed, "but he was also terrible at mending fences and could not cook to save his life." Jackson laughed. "No one is perfect." "What about you?" Beatrice asked, emboldened by his laughter. "Why has no woman snapped up a successful rancher like yourself?" The laughter faded from Jackson's eyes, replaced by something more complicated. "I was engaged once, about 3 years ago. Her name was Catherine. She was beautiful, charming, everything I thought I wanted. But a month before the wedding, I found out she was only interested in my money. She already had a man she loved in Denver. She was planning to marry me and continue seeing him." "Oh, Jackson, I am so sorry." He shrugged, but Beatrice could see the old hurt lingering. "It taught me to be careful, to not trust easily. I threw myself into building my ranch after that, did not have much time for courting, or maybe I just did not have much interest in it anymore." Beatrice understood that feeling. After Thomas died, the thought of ever caring for someone else had seemed impossible. But sitting here with Jackson, listening to him talk, watching the way he was gentle with Emma, she felt something stirring that she had thought was dead and buried. Jackson started visiting regularly after that, usually once every 2 weeks. Sometimes he brought supplies. Sometimes he helped with repairs around the farm. Sometimes he just came to talk, to share a meal, to sit on the porch while Emma played nearby. Beatrice found herself looking forward to his visits, counting the days until she would see him again. The people in Lead noticed, of course. Small towns always noticed. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, made pointed comments about how attentive Mr. Ashford was. The banker, Mr. Peterson, stopped Beatrice in the general store to ask about her relationship with the generous rancher. Beatrice held her head high and told them all that Jackson Ashford was simply a friend of her late husband, helping out as Thomas would have wanted. But late at night, alone in the bed she used to share with Thomas, Beatrice knew it was more than that. She was falling for Jackson Ashford, despite every promise she had made to herself about never loving again. She tried to fight it, tried to remind herself that Thomas had only been gone a year and a half, that it was too soon, that people would talk. But then Jackson would arrive with that quiet smile and all her resolutions would crumble. He made her laugh. He listened when she talked. He treated Emma like she was precious. He never pushed, never demanded anything from her, content to simply be present in whatever way she allowed. One evening in late October, after Emma had gone to bed, Jackson and Beatrice sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The air had turned crisp with the promise of winter, and Beatrice had wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "I need to tell you something," Jackson said quietly. Beatrice's heart jumped into her throat. "What is it?" "I have not been entirely honest with you about why I keep visiting." He turned to look at her, his eyes serious in the lamplight spilling from the house. "It started as wanting to honor Thomas's memory, to make sure you and Emma were all right. But Beatrice, it has become so much more than that." She could not breathe, could not move, could only wait for him to continue. "I care about you," Jackson said. "More than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. I think about you constantly. I look for excuses to visit. I time my trips to town to match when you will be at the general store. I am falling in love with you, and I needed to tell you, even if you do not feel the same way." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson, I do not know if I am ready for this. I know, and I will wait as long as you need. I just wanted you to know how I feel, no pressure, no expectations. Just the truth." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength in his fingers. "I care about you too, so much that it scares me, but I keep thinking about Thomas, about what people will say, about whether it is too soon." "What do you think Thomas would want for you?" Beatrice laughed through her tears. "He would want me to be happy. He would probably like you a great deal. He always admired men who worked hard and treated people fairly." "Then maybe that is your answer." They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the stars. Finally, Beatrice spoke. "I am not ready to marry again, not yet, but I would like to keep seeing you if you are willing to be patient with me." Jackson squeezed her hand gently. "I will wait as long as you need, Beatrice. There is nowhere else I would rather be than right here with you." The winter was hard, as winters in the Black Hills always were, but Beatrice no longer faced it alone. Jackson visited as often as the weather permitted, sometimes staying in town when snow made the trip back to his ranch too dangerous. He helped her prepare the farm for winter, making sure the house was properly chinked against the cold, that she had enough firewood stacked, that her supplies would last. On Christmas, he arrived with gifts for Emma, including a beautiful new doll and a wooden horse he had carved himself. For Beatrice, he brought a warm shawl in deep blue wool. "It matches your eyes," he said as she wrapped it around herself. Beatrice had made him a new shirt, spending hours by lamplight to ensure every stitch was perfect. When he opened it, the look on his face made all those hours worthwhile. "I will treasure this," he said quietly. "Thank you." They shared Christmas dinner, the three of them, and for the first time since Thomas died, the house felt full again. Emma chattered happily about her new toys. Jackson told stories about Christmas on the ranch. Beatrice felt something she had not felt in so long, contentment. After Emma went to bed, Jackson and Beatrice sat by the fire, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I have been thinking about the future," Beatrice said softly. "About what I want it to look like. And what do you want?" Jackson asked, his voice equally quiet. "I want Emma to grow up happy and safe. I want the farm to thrive. And I want you in my life, Jackson, not just as a friend, but as something more." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" I am saying that I am falling in love with you. I am saying that I think Thomas would approve. I am saying that I am ready to stop being afraid of what people might think or whether it is too soon. Life is too short and too uncertain to waste time on fear." Jackson cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "Beatrice Vaughn, you are the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. I love you with everything I am." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like kissing Thomas had been, but that was all right. This was not about replacing what she had lost. This was about finding something new, something precious in its own right. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Jackson asked. "Now we take things one day at a time. We let people talk if they must. We build something together, you and me and Emma. We make a life." "I like the sound of that." Jackson proposed in the spring, on a warm April morning when the wildflowers were blooming across the hills. He had taken Beatrice and Emma on a picnic to a spot that overlooked the farm, and while Emma chased butterflies, he got down on one knee and pulled out a simple gold band. "I know you still wear Thomas's ring," he said, "and I would never ask you to take it off. But I would be honored if you would wear this one too. Marry me, Beatrice. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Emma shrieked with delight when they told her, throwing herself at Jackson and demanding to know if she could call him Papa. Jackson looked to Beatrice, who nodded through her tears. "I would be honored if you called me Papa," Jackson told Emma, scooping her up into his arms. They were married in June, in a small ceremony at the church in Lead. Some people in town whispered about the hasty remarriage, but most were genuinely happy for Beatrice. She had suffered enough, they said. She deserved some joy. Jackson moved to the farm rather than taking Beatrice to his ranch. It was important to her that Emma grow up in the home her father had built, and Jackson understood that. He sold his ranch to his foreman for a fair price and brought his best horses with him to South Dakota. Together, they worked to make the farm profitable again. Jackson's knowledge of ranching combined with Beatrice's determination made them a formidable team. They expanded the cattle operation, planted better crops with the seed Jackson had brought, made improvements to the irrigation that helped them weather the dry spells. The first year of their marriage was not without its challenges. They had to learn to live together, to navigate disagreements, to blend their different ways of doing things. There were nights when Beatrice woke from dreams of Thomas and felt guilty for being happy with Jackson. There were times when Jackson worried he was failing to live up to his predecessor's memory, but they talked through every difficulty. They learned to communicate, to compromise, to support each other. And slowly, the rough edges smoothed out. They found their rhythm, their partnership, their joy. In the spring of 1875, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified to tell Jackson, worried about what it might mean, whether he would see it as replacing Thomas's child. But when she finally worked up the courage to share the news, Jackson's face lit up with pure happiness. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. You are not worried about what people will say." "I do not care what anyone says. We are married. We love each other. Having a child together is a blessing, not something to be ashamed of." Emma was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a big sister. She helped Beatrice prepare a room for the baby, chattering excitedly about all the things she would teach the new arrival. Their son was born in November, a healthy baby boy with Jackson's dark hair and Beatrice's blue eyes. They named him Thomas Jackson Ashford, honoring both the man who had brought them together and the man who now shared Beatrice's life. Jackson held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Yes, he is," Beatrice agreed, watching her husband cradle their child with infinite tenderness. Emma adored her baby brother, helping to care for him with the seriousness of an 8-year-old taking on important responsibilities. She sang to him when he cried, showed him her treasures, told him stories about his namesake. "You think my first papa would like him?" Emma asked Beatrice one evening. "I think your first papa would love him very much," Beatrice assured her, "and I think he would be very happy that we have Jackson to take care of us now." "I think so too," Emma said. "I still miss him though." "That is good, sweetheart. You should always remember him. But it is also good to love Jackson. You can love them both." "I do love them both," Emma said simply, and Beatrice's heart swelled. As young Thomas grew, the farm thrived. Jackson and Beatrice made a good team, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. She managed the household and the crop planning while he handled the cattle and horses. Together, they turned the struggling farm into one of the most successful operations in the area. They built a bigger barn to house Jackson's growing horse breeding program. They hired a few ranch hands to help with the work. They added a room onto the house for the children. Each improvement was made carefully, with an eye toward the future they were building together. In 1877, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. And 2 years after that, another son they called James. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, exactly as it should be. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, eventually marrying a kind farmer from a neighboring property. Jackson walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, proud of the woman she had become. She named her first son Thomas, carrying on the tradition of honoring the past while building the future. As the years passed, Beatrice sometimes thought about the day she had sat on the porch, convinced her life was over. She thought about the stranger who had ridden onto her property with an impossible offer. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything, and how grace had arrived in the form of a debt, repaid to a man she had loved and lost. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Young Thomas was 10 now, Sarah 8, and James 6. All of them were healthy, happy, full of energy. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Beatrice said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "For all of this, for you." Jackson wrapped his arm around her. "I am the grateful one. You gave me a family, Beatrice. A home. A reason to wake up every morning with a smile. I would buy that farm 1,000 times over for what I have now." "We built this together," Beatrice reminded him. "All of it." "We did," Jackson agreed. "And we will keep building it for as long as we have." They grew old together on that farm, watching their children grow and have children of their own, watching the land prosper under their care. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to grandchildren who listened with wide eyes. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Beatrice with a new deed to the property. This one listed both their names as owners, officially making it theirs together rather than just hers. "You gave me this farm," Beatrice said, holding the deed with trembling hands. "Why change it now?" "Because it was always meant to be ours," Jackson said. "From the moment I first saw you on that porch, fierce and proud and refusing to give up, I knew my life was about to change. This farm brought us together, and now it belongs to both of us, just as it should." Beatrice kissed him, this man who had saved her farm and won her heart, who had proven every day for 25 years that love could come again after loss. That happiness was not a finite resource, that opening your heart to new possibilities was always worth the risk. "I love you, Jackson Ashford," she said. "And I love you, Beatrice Ashford," he replied, "for the rest of my days and beyond." Their children and grandchildren gathered that evening for a celebration. The house Beatrice had nearly lost to the bank was filled with family, with laughter, with the sound of multiple generations sharing space and love and stories. Young Thomas, now a young man himself, asked to hear the story of how his parents met, even though he had heard it dozens of times before. Jackson and Beatrice told it together, trading off parts of the narrative, correcting each other's details, laughing at the memories. They told about the foreclosure notice, the stranger on horseback, the impossible offer that changed everything. They talked about learning to trust, learning to love again, learning that the future could be just as beautiful as the past, just in different ways. "So Papa just gave you the farm?" young Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "With nothing in return." "Not nothing," Jackson corrected gently. "I got to know your mother. I got this family. I got a life that means something. That is hardly nothing." "Grandma, were you scared?" asked Emma's oldest daughter, named Beatrice after her grandmother. "Terrified," Beatrice admitted. "I was scared of trusting him, scared of what people would think, scared of loving again after losing your grandfather Thomas. But do you know what I learned? Being scared is not a reason to say no to something good. Sometimes the scariest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes." As the evening wore on and the grandchildren were put to bed, the adult children helped clean up while Jackson and Beatrice returned to their favorite spot on the porch. The stars were out, bright and clear in the South Dakota sky, the same stars that had watched over them for all these years. "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Giving up your ranch, moving here, taking on a ready-made family?" Jackson pulled her close, and even after all these years, his touch still made her heart flutter. "Not for a single moment. My ranch was just land and cattle. This is a home. You made it a home and you let me be part of it. That is worth more than any ranch could ever be." "Thomas would have liked you," Beatrice said. "I wish you could have known him better." "I know him through you," Jackson said. "Through Emma. Through the way you talk about him, the way you have kept his memory alive. He was a good man who loved his family and helped people when he could. I am honored to carry on what he started." Beatrice thought about the two men she had loved, so different from each other yet both good in their own ways. Thomas had been young love, passionate and impulsive, full of dreams and optimism. Jackson was mature love, steady and reliable, built on friendship and respect as much as attraction. Both had given her gifts beyond measure. "I am a lucky woman," she said, "to have been loved by two such good men." "We are the lucky ones," Jackson corrected. "Every day I wake up next to you is a gift I do not deserve but am grateful for anyway." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the farm. The horses in the barn, the cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the crops. This land had seen so much. Thomas building the house with his own hands, full of hope for the future. Beatrice struggling to keep it after he was gone, facing down despair and loss. Jackson arriving like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. Their life together, built brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. The farm had been saved not just by money but by love. By Jackson's love for the memory of a man who had helped him. By Beatrice's love for her late husband and the home they had built. And by the love that grew between two wounded souls who found healing in each other. "Tell me about tomorrow," Beatrice said, a game they had played for years. "Tomorrow, I will wake up early and check on the new foal in the barn," Jackson said. "You will make that coffee that is far too strong but I pretend to like because you look so pleased with yourself when you pour it. Young Thomas will want to help me with the horses. Sarah will be in the garden with you. James will probably get into some kind of mischief that we will laugh about later." "And tomorrow night," Beatrice prompted. "Tomorrow night, we will sit right here again, counting our blessings and planning the day after that. just like we always do. It sounds perfect. It is perfect. You made it perfect. Beatrice settled against her husband's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the woman she had been, standing on this very porch, watching strangers nail up a foreclosure notice. That woman had been so certain her life was over, so convinced that losing the farm meant losing everything. But she had been wrong. The farm was just land and buildings. What mattered was the people, the love, the family. The farm had brought Jackson to her, but it was their love that had truly saved them both. "Jackson," she said softly. "Yes, my love. Thank you for buying back my farm. Thank you for giving me a home." They stayed on the porch until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cool. Then they went inside together, to the bed they shared, in the house that held all their memories and all their dreams. The deed with both their names lay safe in the desk, a symbol of everything they had built together. The farm would pass to their children someday, and to their children's children after that. The land that had almost been lost would remain in the family, a testament to second chances and unexpected grace, to the stranger who became a husband, to the widow who learned to love again. But that was years away yet. For now, there was just tonight and tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Beatrice and Jackson Ashford, partners in every sense of the word, growing old together on the land they both loved, surrounded by the family they had created. It was more than enough. It was everything. Years continued to pass, each one adding its own stories to the tapestry of their life. Young Thomas took over most of the cattle operation as he grew into manhood, showing a natural talent for ranching that made Jackson proud. Sarah married a banker from Deadwood and moved into town, but visited every Sunday with her growing family. James, the youngest and most adventurous, talked about seeing California, but kept finding reasons to stay close to home. Emma's children were constant presences on the farm, spending summers running through the same fields their mother had played in, learning to ride horses from Jackson, learning to bake bread from Beatrice. The farm became a gathering place for the whole extended family, a constant in a changing world. The country changed around them. The wild days of the West began to tame. Railroads connected distant cities. More settlers arrived, turning frontier towns into proper communities. Lead grew from a rough mining settlement into a respectable town with churches and schools and civic organizations. Beatrice served on the church ladies' committee. Jackson joined the town council. They became pillars of the community, respected and admired. But they never forgot where they had come from. They never forgot the hard times, the near loss, the desperate days when the future looked impossibly dark. Because of that, they were always ready to help others facing similar struggles. Jackson quietly helped several families avoid foreclosure, sometimes with loans, sometimes with outright gifts. Beatrice organized the church women to provide food and clothing to those in need. "We are just paying it forward," Jackson said, when Beatrice thanked him for his generosity. "Your husband would be proud of you," Beatrice told him, "both for what you do and for the man you have become." "He is your husband too now," Jackson reminded her gently. "I am your husband. After 30 years, I think I have earned the title without qualification." Beatrice laughed. "You have indeed. I am sorry. Old habits." "No need to apologize. I know what you meant. And Beatrice, I hope Thomas would be proud. I have tried to live up to the example he set, to be the kind of man who deserves you and our children." "You are exactly that kind of man. You always have been." On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a massive celebration. 3 generations filled the house and spilled out into the yard. Long tables groaned under the weight of food prepared by dozens of hands. Children played tag between the buildings while adults talked and laughed and shared stories. Jackson stood on the porch, looking out over the gathered family with wonder. "How did we get so lucky?" he asked Beatrice. "Hard work," she replied, "and love, and being willing to take a chance on each other." "Best chance I ever took." Emma approached them, her own children grown now, her hair showing streaks of gray. "Mama, Papa, everyone wants you to say a few words." Beatrice and Jackson walked to the center of the gathering, and gradually the crowd quieted. Jackson cleared his throat, suddenly emotional. "30 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known," he began. "She had every reason to turn me away, to be suspicious of my motives, to protect her heart. But she took a chance on me, and that choice changed both our lives. We have built something beautiful together," Beatrice continued, taking over seamlessly. "Not just this farm, though we are proud of what we have created here, but a family, a legacy, a home filled with love. We have shown our children and grandchildren that loss is not the end, that second chances are real, that love can bloom even in the hardest soil." "Thank you all for being here," Jackson said, "for being part of our story, for carrying on what we have started. This farm, this family, this love, it all continues through you." The celebration lasted well into the night. By the time the last guests departed, Beatrice was exhausted but happy. She and Jackson sat on their porch once more, a ritual they had maintained for decades. 30 years, Beatrice mused. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like forever." "Both," Jackson agreed. "I remember the first time I saw you like it was this morning. But I also cannot imagine a time when you were not part of my life. Do you ever think about how different things might have been? If Thomas had not helped you on that cattle drive, if you had not heard about the foreclosure, if I had refused your help?" "Sometimes," Jackson admitted. "And it terrifies me. All the little choices that had to align perfectly for us to find each other. It feels like fate, or grace," Beatrice suggested. "Thomas used to say that grace appears when we need it most, often in forms we do not expect. He was a wise man, he was, and so are you." They fell silent, holding hands like young sweethearts. The farm settled into its nighttime rhythms around them, familiar and comforting. This land had held their sorrows and their joys, had witnessed their struggles and their triumphs, had been the foundation on which they built everything that mattered. "I hope I go first," Jackson said suddenly. Beatrice turned to him in surprise. "What a thing to say! I mean it." "I do not want to live in a world without you in it, Beatrice. I went 26 years before you. That is enough time without you for any lifetime." "Well, I hope we go together then," Beatrice said firmly. "Hand in hand the way we have done everything else. That would be perfect." But life rarely follows our plans, perfect or otherwise. 2 years later, Jackson took ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. Beatrice nursed him day and night, refusing to leave his side, terrified of losing him. Their children took turns helping, bringing food and supplies, keeping the farm running while their parents focused on fighting the illness. For 3 weeks, Jackson hovered between life and death. Beatrice prayed harder than she had prayed since Thomas died, bargaining with God, promising anything if he would just let Jackson stay with her a little longer. And somehow, miraculously, Jackson recovered. He emerged from the illness thinner and weaker, but alive. Beatrice wept with relief when he finally sat up in bed and asked for real food instead of broth. "I am not ready to leave you yet," he told her, his voice raspy from weeks of coughing. "We have more years together. I can feel it." He was right. Jackson recovered his strength over the following months, and they had 5 more good years together. They watched James finally head to California, then returned 2 years later with a wife and plans to build a house on the eastern portion of the farm. They welcomed more grandchildren, and then great-grandchildren, an ever-expanding circle of family. They traveled a bit, taking a train to San Francisco to visit James, marveling at the ocean and the great bridges. They went to Denver to see the opera, to Cheyenne for the Frontier Days celebration. But they always came home to the farm, to the land that held their hearts. "There is no place I would rather be," Jackson said each time they returned. In the spring of 1898, as they approached their 40th anniversary, Jackson's health began to fail again. This time it was not an illness that could be fought, but simply age catching up with him. He was 69 years old, and a lifetime of hard work had taken its toll. Beatrice, at 60, was still strong, and she devoted herself to making Jackson comfortable. They spent long hours on the porch, wrapped in blankets, talking about their life together, sharing memories, making peace with the approaching end. "Do you have any regrets?" Beatrice asked him one warm afternoon. Jackson thought for a long moment. "I regret that I did not meet you sooner. I regret the years I wasted being bitter after Catherine. I regret every moment I have spent away from you when I could have been by your side." "Those are not real regrets," Beatrice said gently. "Those are just wishes for more time. But we have had 40 beautiful years, Jackson. 40 years of love and partnership and building something that will last long after we are gone. That is more than most people ever get. You are right, as always. What about you? Any regrets?" "I regret not trusting you immediately when you first offered to help. I wasted time being suspicious and proud when I could have been falling in love with you sooner. But otherwise, no. I have lived a full life, Jackson. I have been loved by 2 good men. I have raised wonderful children. I have built a home and a legacy. I am content." "I love you, Beatrice Ashford," Jackson said, his voice weak but sincere. "And I love you, Jackson Ashford, always and forever." Jackson passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later with Beatrice holding his hand. She woke at dawn to find him gone, his face peaceful, finally free from pain. She sat with him for a long time, memorizing his beloved features one last time, saying goodbye to the man who had saved her farm and captured her heart. The funeral was enormous. It seemed like everyone in Lead and the surrounding counties came to pay their respects. Jackson had touched many lives with his generosity and kindness. Dozens of people came forward to share stories of how he had helped them, often in ways Beatrice had never known about. "Your husband was a good man," person after person told her, and Beatrice nodded, throat too tight with tears to speak. She buried him next to the spot she had reserved for herself, in the small cemetery plot on the hill overlooking the farm. Thomas was buried in the church cemetery in town, but Jackson belonged here, on the land he had loved, where he could watch over the farm forever. After the funeral, Beatrice returned to the empty house. Her children had offered to stay with her, but she had sent them home to their own families. She needed some time alone to process this new grief, to figure out how to move forward without her partner. She walked through the house, seeing Jackson everywhere. His coat hanging by the door, his chair by the fireplace, the bed they had shared for 40 years, now impossibly large and empty. She had survived losing Thomas. She knew she could survive this too. But knowing and feeling were different things. That night, she sat on the porch alone, wrapped in the blue shawl Jackson had given her their first Christmas together. The stars came out, the same stars that had watched over all their years together. She felt Jackson's absence like a physical ache, but beneath the grief was gratitude. She had been blessed to love and be loved by such a man. "Thank you," she whispered to the night, to Jackson's memory, to Thomas who had brought them together even after death, to whatever force in the universe had allowed their paths to cross. "Thank you for 40 beautiful years." Beatrice lived for another 12 years, remaining on the farm with young Thomas and his family, who had moved into the main house to care for her. She spent her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending her garden, telling stories of the old days, keeping the memories alive. She had a good life in those remaining years, full of family and purpose. But she missed Jackson every single day. She visited his grave regularly, talking to him about the family, about the farm, about her life. Sometimes, she brought picnic lunches and spent the whole afternoon sitting by his headstone, feeling close to him in that quiet place. On what would have been their 52nd anniversary, Beatrice went to bed early, feeling more tired than usual. Young Thomas found her the next morning, passed away peacefully in her sleep with a small smile on her face. They buried her next to Jackson, just as she had wanted. The whole family gathered again, now 4 generations strong, to say goodbye to the woman who had held them all together. They told stories of her strength, her kindness, her resilience in the face of loss, her capacity for love. Emma, now 71 herself, stood at her mother's grave and shared the story one more time, the story that had shaped all their lives. About a widow facing foreclosure. About a cowboy who repaid a debt to a dead man. About impossible generosity and unexpected love. About taking chances and building something beautiful from loss and grief. "My mother taught us that love does not run out," Emma said, her voice carrying across the gathered family. "That you can love and lose and love again. That opening your heart, even when it has been broken, is the bravest thing a person can do." She lived that lesson twice. First when she lost my father and thought her life was over, then when she let Jackson in and built a new life. And then when she lost Jackson but kept going, kept loving, kept living. "This farm was almost lost," young Thomas added, standing beside his sister. "But a stranger gave it back, asking nothing in return. He could not have known that his generosity would create all of this." He gestured to the assembled family, dozens of people across multiple generations, all descended from Beatrice and her 2 husbands. But that is what happened. One act of kindness, one debt repaid, created a legacy of love that will continue for generations to come. As the family departed the cemetery, they walked past both graves. Thomas Vaughn's stone in the church cemetery bore the inscription, "Beloved husband and father." He believed in second chances. Jackson Ashford's stone next to Beatrice's read, "Beloved husband, father, and friend." He kept a promise. And Beatrice's stone, fresh and new, completed the story. Beloved wife and mother, she loved twice and lived fully. The farm continued to thrive under young Thomas's management, just as it had under his parents'. The story of how it was saved became family legend, told and retold, embellished and treasured. Children grew up hearing about the cowboy who bought back the farm and gave the widow the deed, about how that act of generosity led to a great love story and eventually to their own existence. The physical deed itself, carefully preserved in a glass frame, hung in the front room of the farmhouse. 2 names were written on it in fading ink, Jackson Ashford and Beatrice Ashford. Beneath it, a small plaque told the story in brief, so that every generation would know where they came from and what had made their family possible. It was not just a story about a farm saved or a debt repaid. It was a story about the resilience of the human heart, about the courage it takes to love again after loss, about the unexpected ways grace appears in our lives. It was about a widow who refused to give up, a cowboy who honored an old kindness, and the beautiful life they built together from the ashes of grief and the foundation of generosity. And every spring, when the wildflowers bloomed on the hills above the farm, members of the family would gather at the 2 graves on the overlook. They would stand in silence for a moment, honoring the love story that had started it all, grateful for the choices made so long ago that had brought them all into being. The farm remained in the family for generations, a testament to the power of love and the importance of second chances. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, people claimed to see two figures sitting on the old porch, holding hands and watching the stars, well, that seemed fitting too. After all, some loves are strong enough to last beyond a lifetime. Some loves echo through the generations, shaping the future in ways we cannot predict. And some loves begin with an impossible gesture, a gift freely given, and a heart brave enough to accept it. This was that kind of love, the kind that saved not just a farm but two broken hearts. The kind that built a family and a legacy that would endure long after the last board of the original house had rotted away. The kind that proved, beyond any doubt, that grace exists, second chances are real, and love is always, always worth the risk.